Welcome to Ask the Experts. I'm Jill Schlesinger of CBS MoneyWatch. I'm joined by
Jack Otter, executive editor of CBS MoneyWatch.
And luckily, we have our friend Brian Montopoli. You should do your own ID because you're like part of the family already. You're
Brian Montopoli, political hot sheet, CBSNews.com.
Wait a minute. Don't you have a title like senior?
I am the senior political reporter. Although I will note that I only have that title because I requested it at one point, so don't read too much into
Titles
it.
are easy, aren't they?
Instead of raises.
But how lucky, because we were going to come on and we are going to talk about politics and money. There's a lot to talk about today. But Brian, we've got to get your reaction to this breaking news about President Obama, who said that he personally thinks same-sex couples should have the ability to marry. So what's your reaction to this?
Well, I think most of us in the political world thought that Obama supported same-sex marriage, but didn't think he was going to say it until he, potentially won a second term. But look, Joe Biden got in the way. Joe Biden comes out and he says, I'm comfortable with this. Arnie Duncan comes out and says he's comfortable with this. We have the North Carolina amendment vote yesterday. And this was not going away as an issue for them. For Obama, you don't want to be talking about gay marriage in an election year. You want to be talking about the economy. That's the issue that is of most importance to voters. But because they knew the story was going to dog them, because they knew it wasn't going to go away, they say, you know what? Let's do this now. Let's put it behind us, and then let's move on to focus on the economy, because they did not want to be talking about gay marriage in July, August, September, when people are really tuned in. So obviously a historic day, but also one that I think is grounded in a lot of political calculation.
Okay. Well, good to know. See, I always like to have
it's good to have Brian with us.
I was trying to find the money angle, but there really isn't any, I don't think.
Only that they need to focus on the economy, and this is a distraction from that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's talk about the main focus of this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the markets and specifically Europe. So today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 96 points at 12,835. That may sound bad, but let me just say this. It was the weirdest day in the market. And this morning, I'm doing a bunch of radio hits, and it looks colossally bad. Like, I really talked to somebody who said this could be a 500-point down day on the Dow. Like, he was very convinced of it. And it did get ugly early on. Didn't end up quite as bad. In fact, NASDAQ was only down 11.5 points, so 29.34 on the NASDAQ. S&P 500 down 9, 13.54. Now, this is the sixth straight decline for the Dow. Jack, kind of weird, but what do you take out of this?
It's actually been a pattern we've seen for a couple of days now. We've seen really ugly markets in the morning as Europe falls on bad economic news over there, Greece troubles and so forth. And then there's clearly a bid on Wall Street because throughout the day it's going up, 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 up. One day we actually crossed into the green. So I think that there's obviously some fear, some arbitrage, probably traders in Europe selling American stocks, and then people here buying. That optimism that we saw kick in early this year, I think, is still undergirding the market.
Now, I will tell you that in the old days, we used to call the opening the amateur hour. It's when the idiots would actually play. And that's when people would enter orders, and they'd usually enter market orders in the first hour of trading. And we would laugh, look at how much money we're making from all the idiots. And it is starting to feel a little bit strange, though, that in other words, we kind of woke up after the weekend and we said, oh, my God, Europe is a big problem again. And we found out that the elections in both France and in Greece really were pretty seminal. They were a big deal. And so I think that these kinds of moves throughout the day are really about investors trying to figure out, how worried should I be about that? And how worried, is it really okay?
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, clearly Greece looks a lot closer to a default. Citi is putting it at more than 50% likelihood. But I think American banks have had plenty of time to gird themselves for this. Clearly, the sovereigns in Europe, the French are going to get hammered. The French banks, probably the German banks. The fear is a trickle effect that could hurt Italy and Spain. And then suddenly Americans would have to worry because if nothing else, the global economy is going to take a hit.
One good piece of news for the president today, oil prices down again. In fact, oil down under $97 a barrel. Hello, it was 110 like yesterday practically. Right. And gas prices are off 15 cents from the high, 20 cents from a month ago. The trend is certainly your friend in this case, and it does look like for the summer driving season, we are going to see lower gas prices, Jack. This is good.
It absolutely is good news, and of course, it is a nice balancing effect. So the economy starts to heat up, gas prices go up. That can put a damper on the economy. Now we have some economic fears. Gas prices go down. Maybe that'll give a little bit of boost. It'll put a few more cents in people's pockets. And the whole commodities market has gotten hammered. Gold is going down, silver, everything. Those can be leading indicators sometimes. Copper is the famous one. So maybe the markets know something, and we could be in for a rough spell.
Or it could just be a total risk-off trade. Or it could be like, you know what? I'm selling everything that's risky. I'm getting out. I'm buying U.S. Treasuries. I'm buying the German bonds. And I'm buying the U.S. dollar. And I'll chill out for a while and see what happens
And
next.
that's clearly happening. I mean, the 10-year keeps on going down. Mortgages hit yet another low, another record low. The German Bund is doing great. And Spanish bonds, Italian bonds getting hurt.
Not so good. Don't want to be lending the Spanish or the Italians money. I think I knew that somewhere back when. Let's talk a little bit about Europe. So we have these big elections, okay, in France and in Greece. And ostensibly what has happened, Jack, is the people are saying all this cutting, we get it, but it's gone too far.
Yeah.
And they booted out the governments that were about austerity. And I guess the question is, number one, is that a message that will be reverberating throughout Europe? And is there some message we need to take here in the U.S. or some lessons to learn?
Well, the second question is the really interesting one. In terms of throughout Europe, it's tough. I doubt the Germans are going to go in that direction. The British have their own currency. So what I think is interesting is we could have this fascinating experiment. I'm kind of discounting Greece. That's a mess. I don't know what we're going to learn from Greece. But if France goes in a more Keynesian, less austerity direction, it'll be fascinating to see what happens. Now, the fact that its currency is tied, or its currency is the euro, they're all tied together, it's not sort of a pure petri dish. It's a little bit polluted by that, and so both sides can take their own lessons from it. But, you've got Obama saying we need to prime the pump a little bit, and Romney and the Republicans obviously saying no, government cutbacks are the way to go. Maybe France versus Germany, France versus Ireland. Ireland is trying big-time austerity, getting hammered.
Right, and British. The British economy is in another recession, and they've also been sticking to austerity.
So if France should do well, the Keynesians are going to be happy.
Another interesting comparison I see on this is in Europe, when the Germans have to bail out Greece, it's this permanent bailout. In America, when the rich states like New York and California consistently send their tax dollars to the poor states, states like Missouri, that's just the way we do things. And it's interesting to me that there's this divide, because if Europe was more like the United States and we sort of understood it as a whole, then the perception would just be, look, Germany's where the money is, and they're going to subsidize the people in Greece. I think part of the reason we haven't had this negative reaction to austerity in the same way in the United States as people have in Europe is because we have this different perspective where we're sort of all in it together. And to me, this is a real test of the bonds between these states in Europe. I mean, do the Germans feel like they have some connection with the Greek people? And I'm not sure that they do.
I know how they are connected. You see, you were wondering. There's two ways that they're connected. Number one, they vacation there. Germans vacation in Greece. So that's one thing. But the bigger issue, which makes me want to throttle Angela Merkel, and I think I could take her. She's tough, but I'm pretty sure whatever. But I'm tough too, and I got a little German in me. I know that whole deal. There's all this talk, this holier-than-thou talk about those really bad people in Greece and in Italy and Spain. Who was lending the money to those countries? The German banks. So it's almost like the dealer is saying, I can't believe you users got addicted to my stuff. It's unbelievable. And it's so holier than thou. They got something out of it. Germany's economy was really absolutely bumped up by the European Union. They made a Faustian bargain, and they don't want to hold up their end of the bargain right now. They said, we're going to dump all of our exports into this place. You're going to sell it all. We're going to finance it. You can buy all this stuff. Yeah, we'll give you the money to buy it. And now they're crying like, oh, we don't want to help out. It's baloney.
And that's a crucial point, because they were selling their stuff to these other countries in euros. Had it not been for the common currency, then the Italians would have had to pay lira, and the Greeks would have had to pay drachma, and those aren't worth so much. So the German economy would not be where it was today had they not had this common currency.
Not. That's why it's such a false premise that she operates on.
Bringing it back to the U.S. for a second, I think also you look around Europe and you're seeing all of these governments getting kicked out, right? Not just France, but I mean Berlusconi in Italy. You've seen it in a lot of
This is the eighth one. This is the eighth government to go down since the financial crisis.
So let's say in America we finally get serious about dealing with our debt and deficit, and we finally put in some austerity measures, some serious austerity measures, which we haven't done. If you're the one pushing that, are you worried that the response is going to be riots in the street and losing your place? I mean, losing your elected role? I mean, I think that's a real question that needs to be asked. It is a different. Certainly, we don't. It doesn't feel to me like we're on the verge of that. But you start taking away people's Social Security and Medicare, maybe we're not going to get riots over Social Security.
Wait a second, slow down, Turbo. We're not taking away anybody's. We're going to reduce benefits potentially. So we don't want to go too crazy.
You start, say, passing the Paul Ryan Medicare reduction plan, which immediately doesn't have an impact, but in the future does have an impact.
Right.
You wonder if people are going to respond as angrily in the United States. And we just don't know that because these things haven't been passed.
Jack, let me ask you a question. When you think about how austerity and growth are framed in this country, who's winning right now?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Well, I only ask the tough ones.
I think philosophically, austerity wins because it's much easier to understand, right? Especially in a country that was sort of founded by Puritans, and a lot of us, at least in this part of the country, have a Puritan, an old-fashioned Yankee ethic that you shouldn't spend money you don't have, and so forth. And that's easy to understand. That makes a lot of sense. The other side is a little tougher. It argues that you need to have the government spend in times of economic distress in order to keep everything afloat. The government is the buyer of last resort. Until things get better, the government can pull back, and then the economy can go on its own, and the government can actually run surpluses. Of course, the only time we did that was for about 2 months during the tech boom. So the problem is the government keeps on spending in bad times and good, and I think we've kind of run out of confidence in the government.
Now, Brian, the funny thing is when you look at this austerity argument, I think that people kind of maybe might lose sight of the fact that actually it can hurt me. So, for example, because government is pulled back on hiring, we have, 500,000 fewer jobs than we would have had we not had these really tight budget implications on the state level and even on the federal level. So I saw a statistic today that said if government had just held steady, not added, but not cut jobs, that we would be at 7.2% unemployment right now.
Well, there tends to be a disconnect between people's perception of how much the government is helping them and the reality, the famous sign that says, "Keep your government hands off my Medicare."
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily understand the degree to which they are being helped by government programs. And that's why, if you look at the Ryan plan, for example, it doesn't cut defense spending. It doesn't have it's certainly not going to increase tax receipts. A lot of the cuts, the vast majority of the cuts there are coming from programs that help the poor, and not just the poor, but people who depend on things like Medicare and Social Security. And if we do pass that plan, and that is the plan that is being put forth by the Republicans, how will people respond to that? Will they say, "Hey, wait a minute, I am entitled to this stuff," and will they respond as angrily as the Europeans have responded?
So you mean if Romney were to win and we have Republicans controlling the House, right, that thing passes, and then Romney's a one-term president?
Well, I'm certainly not going to go that far, and we're not going to have 60 Republican senators, even if Republicans take the Senate. But if the Republicans are able to push through the agenda that they have gone on record in support of, I do think we are going to have a lot of questions about how a lot of the people in this country who would be in very deep trouble without a lot of government support would respond.
But real good jobs
and in a way that
and a
there's
bright
certainly
future
a good
for America are
Band-Aid
related to the
argument
energy
that can be
field.
made for that approach.
But I want to remind you
but the political
of what
pain could also be dramatic.
I think that it's the old story that people really do not understand what the ramifications are.
Yeah.
Because whenever, you start talking to people about this and they say they don't really get that when the government austerity and cutting back means that you actually slow the economy down. And in fact, many people who have argued for economic growth, like Paul Krugman in the New York Times, have said this is such a slow recovery, in part because the government's not doing enough. So, Jack, let's talk a little bit about where we are in the economy right now. You know, growth is petering around 2.5%. Job creation somewhat tepid, but is this about as good as it's going to be? Is this as good as it gets,
this
man?
is the new normal, right? You know, a lot of people predicted that as a result of the financial crisis, we would have deleveraging on both the government and personal level. That means spending less, borrowing less, and refilling the piggy bank. And so when you do that, you naturally take it out of the economy. So, yeah, I don't see, frankly, the only way to avoid it would be massive government spending, which might not work, and clearly there's no political appetite for it. So yes, I think this is what we get. The hope is that what government spending there is can be as efficient as possible, that the housing industry might finally start to bottom. Today's news was that if you take out, and this is a big if you took out bank-owned property, foreclosures, short sales, and so forth, we actually did see a pickup in prices in the last few months. You put that back in, however, and prices are still going down. So once we can get through this overhang, then demand will push housing prices up. You'll see some nail-banging jobs coming back online, but it's going to take a while. There's no way around it.
Brian, this does not sound like a fabulous platform on which to run. How does the president frame this?
Well, you know, I was just reminded that next week, Hollande, the new French president, is coming to the United States. He's proposed, I think, a 75% tax on the highest earners in France. And he's also a socialist, and he calls himself a socialist. Of course, a lot of Obama's enemies call him a socialist, but I think that's not necessarily a fair characterization. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the president greets Hollande, you know, a professed socialist.
He will not hug. He will be very firm.
I think it's going to have to be a very polite handshake,
right.
maybe with a little bit of sort of like a,
yeah,
there's a bit of a smell in here.
Yeah. I don't want to, not like that. No huggy. No Obama hug.
You know, Obama's platform, and to me, the race we saw on Tuesday really goes at this, where you had a guy, Richard Murdoch, who says, I want to go to Congress and I want to be confrontational. The time to be collegial is over. I'm going to stick to my guns. Obama's message has to be, look, I mean, granted, people sort of bought it 4 years ago and it didn't work, but the message has to be, we have people who are just going to stand by their guns, who are going to fight for one side or the other. I'm willing to raise taxes and I'm willing to cut spending, and we need to do it together, and that has to be the message. Whereas the Republican message tends to be austerity, austerity, austerity. So I think Obama's platform has to be, I'm going to thread the needle on this. I'm going to bring both sides together at least as much as I can. In the Congress we currently have, though, obviously, there's not a lot of bringing together. And the fact that we've seen Dick Lugar, a guy who worked with Democrats and was able to pass some really important stuff, especially on foreign policy, being drummed out in favor of a guy who says, I'm never going to work with the Democrats, and my idea of bipartisanship is for them to agree with me, obviously does not bode well for our ability to pass legislation. But I think Obama's argument has to be that I will raise taxes, I will cut spending, I will do everything that needs to be done instead of just choosing sides.
You know, I think that his people and Obama should have seen this coming, because the way you've just framed it seemed glaringly obvious to those of us on the outside, and yet he didn't, for instance, push for Simpson Bowles. Had he done that, it could have failed spectacularly, but he'd be able to stand up now and say, look, we had a bipartisan compromise,
right.
I got behind it, you guys torpedoed it. You
right.
know?
And he would have had that. And he would have had those votes on record as well. Now, so Brian, that's the president's way to lay out the economy. Romney, may I just point out again that Mr. Romney did say about we should be creating 500,000 jobs a month, which I think we've done 4 times in 50 years.
Yeah.
4 single months. That's it. So he maybe went a little too far there. That said, he's going to just pounce on saying, I know I've heard him say, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Now, the weird thing is, I actually think most people are better off than they were 4 years ago, but they didn't know how bad they were and in what bad shape the economy was in 4 years ago. So what else does Romney need to do except saying he's bad?
I think of Mitt Romney as sort of generic Republican number one. I mean, I hate to say it, but really this election has to be a referendum on Obama. The reason the Republicans chose a guy like Mitt Romney is because he is sort of inoffensive, right? He makes an argument that I will be an acceptable steward of the economy, and then his argument beyond that is, and Obama's terrible, so you got to go with me. So Mitt Romney's argument really is grounded in attacking Barack Obama, convincing Americans the economy is bad. It's interesting, when you go to some of these swing states with Republican governors, like in Virginia, you'll see the Republican governor get up on stage and say, the economy's going great, we're doing fantastic, And then here's Mitt Romney. Romney comes on stage. The economy's terrible. We're doing terrible. You have this mixed message coming from the Republicans because Romney has to be invested in the notion that the economy is a disaster. And you know, really, that's why it's so important what does happen with the economy in the next 6 months or so, whether Romney's argument resonates. I mean, really, this election is about Barack Obama, I think, much more than it's about Mitt Romney.
And just one more question for you about that. If the economy does improve, then where does Romney go? In other words, if we have incremental improvement, not that I think that's going to necessarily happen, but you know what, it could. And the market could go higher and things in Greece could get settled and we could see a new highs. And so where do you go if you're Romney, if things are getting better? You still say it's not good enough?
I don't know where Mitt Romney goes. He seems to have no plan B. It's the economy, the economy, the economy, and then maybe, hey, they'll get a war in Iran and Obama will do something wrong.
Well,
I mean, I don't know where he goes.
You've got health care. So he'll certainly hammer on health care.
I think that's a tough one for him because it's like basically the Massachusetts plan that he put through. So isn't it a difficult, I mean, I have got to imagine that they are going to just absolutely annihilate that platform if he goes that way.
If Romney goes hard on health care, they'll say, hey, we based this plan on your plan in
Right.
Massachusetts. And Romney's got his, oh, well, it's a state level, not a federal level argument. But also, I mean, let's remember the individual mandate, the thing that has Republicans so worked up, that was from the Heritage Foundation. That was a conservative idea, you know. So I just think that's a tough argument for them. And, you know, that's what Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich said in the primary. Romney can't really argue health care.
Sure. So I think that that's true from a rhetorical perspective. Absolutely. And if you look at the history, as you say, it was a Heritage Foundation idea. Nixon was actually to the left of that. But if you are a voter who doesn't like Obamacare, you know, you've got the guy who is named after Obama, and then you've got this guy who says, well, yeah, I used to like it, but now I don't, and I promise you I'm going to repeal it. You're going to go with that. Right. So I think that's what he will do.
Let's shift one more time here. Let's go to the student loan debate. So if Congress doesn't act, we are going to see student loan interest rates on the Stafford loans rise from 3.4% to 6.8%. Please don't freak out if you have a loan. This is not for existing loans. It's for new loans. Brian, how did this become such a big political issue? They both agree.
Both sides want to deal with this. They want to keep the level at where it is now, but the problem is how do you pay for it? The Democrats want to pay for it by increasing Social Security and Medicare taxes for certain private companies. And the Republicans want to pay for it by going after, of course, Obamacare, a preventative health fund in Obamacare. So you've had the Republicans put up their plan, the Democrats put up their plan, Republicans passed theirs in the House, Democrats had theirs blocked in the Senate because you need 60 votes in the Senate. I don't know how it gets resolved. My guess would be some creative accounting. Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, everyone in Congress is on board with keeping these loan rates low. So I think they will stay low. I don't think we're going to reach this sort of point in July where suddenly college kids who are already weighed down with ridiculous debt,
25 G's on average.
I mean, it's crazy, are going to have to face this, but it's not clear how it's going to happen at this point.
We got a question, actually, from somebody who wanted to know about looking for submissions for loans and better grants, and we just want to direct you to MoneyWatch.com, where we have a little what you need to know about college loans. And there are actually some terrific sites that you can check out, and we have links to everything there. But the reality here, Jack, is that there's so many kids who are graduating with this burgeoning debt. I wonder if the student loan $1 trillion that's out there is actually a big impediment to even the first-time housing market or the economy as a whole.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the housing market, but I was recently talking about how housing formation in this country among young people has plummeted. And so clearly, not only do they have trouble getting a job, but they have trouble getting a mortgage because they've got all this overhanging debt. You said 25 on average, but obviously we know there are many, many students out there who are in 6 digits, over $100,000 in loan. It's $1 trillion total. So it's got to be an overhang. So the question is, Jill.
Well, I just wondering, like, in my mind, I ask questions like this and I wonder, is it worth it or is it not worth it? Can I have my graphic, please, Sally? It's much better than, there it is. So Jack wrote this book. I don't know if you've heard, since we talk about it all the time on the show, which I'm happy to
Jack,
do.
what's its rank on Amazon right now?
As of today, it is number 26 in all books on Amazon,
all
number
books.
1 in personal finance. So this is a good day for worth it, not worth it. It's doing very well, yeah. And I need to hire Jill full time.
So Jack actually has a section in his book that asks whether taking out a student loan is worth it versus skipping college. So, Jack, argue this case.
Sure. When
for me.
I looked at this issue, the numbers are ugly in terms of student loans, as we've said. But I gotta say, in the end, it's kind of like food. Food might get more expensive. I'm still going to buy it. And with a college education, to look at it this way, the unemployment rate among college-educated people right now is about 4.1%. That is, economists say that's actually better than full employment. Economists consider 5% full employment because there's always some transition going on. So given that, and given what we know about employment among everybody, especially among people with only high school degrees or those who haven't even graduated from high school, you have to get a college diploma if you're planning to work and not photosynthesize.
And you don't need to go spend a gazillion dollars,
No.
but you have to get a college degree.
You have to get a college degree, and you've got to make sure that you go to a decent school, and I argue against for-profit educations. Those schools tend to not have nearly the graduation rate of nonprofit schools. Those people who do graduate have less opportunity to get hired, and they end up with far more debt.
All right.
What about for your major? I assume philosophy is less lucrative than, say, engineering?
Engineering is the best, but the truth is that so many people go into so many different careers from a liberal arts education that it does depend on what you make of it. So I hate to say, get an engineering degree even though you're a poet at heart, because then you'll be an unhappy person looking for an engineering job and your boss is going to realize it and you'll be in trouble. So
I feel like this should be a Rodney Dangerfield line where I say, happiness is overrated. Let me ask you something, though, more to the point. Not everybody can be an engineer. It's
Right.
hard. You have to have aptitude for this.
Sure.
Not everybody can be a math major or an applied math major. So what fields can you use in the liberal arts world to leverage into other careers that might be making worth money?
I'm going to sound like a liberal arts major here, which I am, but it all depends on what you make of it. So I went to a liberal arts school. There wasn't even a business major there. Most of my friends, because this was like you with the late 80s, they're all in finance. So they're all rich, and they were all American Civ and English and political science majors.
What about for you? I mean, because you're younger than us. So where did most of your friends go from college?
Well, I graduated in college in 1999, and there was still a lot of people who were going to Wall Street to get rich at the time, and I guess there have been for a long time until about 2008. I was an English and economics major. English because I wanted to, and economics because I was scared that if I was an English major, I'd never get a job. A lot of my English major friends went to law school, a
Yes.
decision that a lot of them, I think, are maybe second guessing a little bit with the way things are in that field right now. The economics majors are all making a lot more money than I am.
Now, I feel like I was like the last class where I had a lot of friends who were doctors, a lot. And they already knew that things were getting bad in medicine. I don't know if they thought they were going to get this bad, but I think it's kind of interesting that I just don't hear a lot of people saying, like, I really want to be a doctor. And that seems to have lost its luster.
And doctors are not big fans of President Obama, I have to say, for the most part. That's a field that really, because of the malpractice lawsuit stuff. I mean, I think people still want to be doctors, but, that's also, talk about a field that requires a lot of hard work and a lot of intelligence.
And a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because if you really go into debt, and then the interesting thing is you're so heavily into debt that you're not going and doing the fields that we need. You're not a gerontologist. You're not a primary care physician. You end up being a plastic surgeon or an ENT or something.
Or
you
orthopedist, yeah.
Right, you get to clean someone's ears. Great. Here, and give them collagen.
But
not that there's anything wrong
no,
with that.
it's,
the economics of medicine are tough, no matter, forget about the particular problems in this country and where we're headed or not headed. It's just tough to make money in that field, especially as all the procedures get more and more expensive. Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. Well, this has been, as always, enlightening with you, Mr. Montopoli.
Well, thank you for having me.
And people can find you at Political Hot Sheet on CBSNews.com.
Yeah, and someday I'll get my own personal Twitter account. But until then, we have a Political Hot Sheet Twitter with many, many followers. I've gotten a lot of guff from Jill on the lack of personal branding.
It's not guff. I am cheerleading for your career.
Well,
Why
thank
do
you.
you see it as guff? I think it as positive reinforcement.
I just keep seeing people on Twitter write something and then get in a lot of trouble for it. So
We have a standards department with Bat who will keep us out of
do you clear all
trouble.
of your tweets by bat?
All right, anyway, let's get on to the next. I'm a very judicious tweeter because you know why? Because I come from the securities world and where everything was cleared and everything did have to be pre-cleared. And every time you write an email to somebody or put something out into the public, you think, oh, wait a second. How is this going to be seen by blank, 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 blank?
Right.
So it is a little bit different. All right. So it's been fabulous. We're going to do this again. A lot during the political season. We want to keep doing this. And from our new studio soon. Soon. Stay tuned. New studios at cbsnews.com. Brian Montopoli, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jack Otter and his book, make it number 20. Let's get him to 20 today on Amazon. Worth it, not worth it. I had a manicure, so let me do it this way.
Oh, very nice.
There we go. I did.
I was actually interviewed by Cosmo.com about what is worth it and not worth it. I'm serious. I actually
did. You really want to say that today?
And I said a manicure is worth it. We're not going to go anywhere else about that interview, but I did say a manicure is worth it, and so good for you, Jill.
All I could say, thank you very much. Well, now I'm going to is the expensive manicure worth it, or is it okay to get the cheap one? That's a different story.
From the Cosmo perspective, just the cheap one's fine.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Go check out Jack's book, Worth It, Not Worth It. And we will see you next week on Ask the Experts. Megan, do we have anything exciting booked just yet?
Ellen Gordon Reeves.
Ellen Gordon Reeves' Career Expertisma. So check it out. She's got a lot to say, especially for people who are trying to transfer skills. So check it out next week on Ask the Experts. Thank you so much for watching. He's
Jack Otter.
I'm Jill Schlesinger. We'll see you next week.